By February 1888, Millhaven was no longer a town of prayers. It was a town of fear. Snow blanketed every doorway like a silent warning, and even the church bells refused to ring. People whispered instead of talking, moved instead of living, and every shadow on the street carried a question no one dared to ask aloud. Who would be next? It started with the sick, or so we believed. One by one, the bedridden vanished. Taken, it was said, by Dr. Alaric Thorne. He was a tall man with a face carved from stone and eyes that never blinked long enough to show warmth. No one remembered when he arrived in Millhaven. Some said he came with the winter. Others said he had always been there waiting. Thorne wasn't like other doctors. He never begged for payment, never left prescriptions. He only knocked once, entered without asking, and stayed until the screaming stopped. By morning, he would leave with his black leather case and the patient would be gone. When questioned, he said only that the body no longer mattered. The soul had been tended to. Those who saw him work swore that he moved like a shadow, silent, deliberate, his hands cold enough to numb the air. But what frightened Millhaven most wasn't his skill. It was his calm. Disease spread like wildfire that winter. Coughs turned to wheezing, fevers to delirium, and soon the snow outside the town clinic looked pink where it melted. Yet Dr. Thorne smiled as though every death were a quiet success. Then came the night he treated little Clara Voss. She was 8, pale as milk, her mother begging Thorne to save her. He nodded once, shut the door, and the house went silent. Hours later, he emerged alone. When the mother rushed inside, she found the bed empty. No blood, no body, not even a dent in the pillow. The only thing left was a smell of burned lavender in a small glass vial, sealed tight, pulsing faintly from within. That was the night people stopped calling him doctor and started calling him collector. Still, no one confronted him. Fear built, walls thicker than courage, and every knock in the dark could have been his. He kept to the edge of town, his lantern flickering through the fog like a star that refused to die. Some claimed he was saving them from pain. Others swore he was taking something only death should touch. The church priest tried to warn people, said that no healing came without a price. Days later, he vanished too. They found his robes near the marsh, soaked but without blood. When the snow began to thaw, bones surfaced near the riverbank, small bones, children's bones, white and polished like pearls. The sheriff sealed the area, but by dawn the bones were gone. Only the marks of dragging remained, leading back toward Dr. Thorne's home. And in the center of town square, nailed to the notice board, was a torn page from Thorne's own journal. In red ink it read, "I have cured what life could not." That single sentence was enough to turn prayers into silence. No one went to the church anymore. No one dared fall sick. We burned our dead before he could come for them, and yet, somehow, the footprints still appeared in the snow outside our homes. Always one pair, always stopping at the door. And though I told myself I would never open it, one night when the knocking came for me, I did. The moment I opened that door, the cold rushed in like a living thing. The lantern flame inside my house bent backward, trembling as if afraid. And there he was, Dr. Alaric Thorne, standing beneath the archway, snow melting on his shoulders, his eyes reflecting the dull glow of the street lamp. "You've been sick," he said, his voice flat, almost kind. I wanted to deny it, but the air between us carried a weight that silenced me. His breath didn't cloud in the cold. He held his black case in one hand, the other gloved and trembling slightly. "It won't take long," he whispered, stepping inside before I could answer. The door closed itself behind him with a sound like a coffin sealing. He moved slowly, deliberately, as though every motion had already been practiced 100 times. "Where's your family?" he asked. I told him they had left for Bangor months ago. He smiled faintly, the corners of his mouth twitching upward in something that wasn't relief. "Good," he said. "They won't hear." He placed the case on my table, and the sound of metal instruments clinking echoed through the room. The smell of chemicals filled the air, sharp, bitter, and old. He didn't look at me as he spoke. You know, souls are heavier than the body. People think they float, but they don't. They sink. They need help to rise. I asked what he meant. He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled from his coat a small glass vial, the same kind the Voss girl's mother had found. It glowed faintly blue, pulsing like a heart underwater. "This one fought," he murmured. "The good ones always do." He set it beside the case, his eyes distant. I took a step back, but he followed. "I used to think healing meant saving the flesh," he continued. "But flesh decays. Souls do not if you tend to them right." I could hear the wind outside, but inside every sound felt trapped. The clock stopped ticking. Even my heartbeat sounded slower, heavier, as if something was pulling it down. He moved closer until I could smell the faint mix of rust and burnt herbs on his coat. "You've seen the snow turn red," he said softly. "That's not blood. That's what happens when the world exhales what it can't keep." I didn't understand, and maybe I didn't want to. His hand lifted toward my chest, hovering inches from my heart. "Don't be afraid, you won't die," he said. "You'll just stay." For a moment, everything was still, the kind of stillness that hums louder than sound. Then he blinked, slow and final, and whispered, "Let it go." I felt the air leave my lungs, not by will, but by command. My vision dimmed, but I saw him smile, soft, satisfied, sorrowful. Somewhere far away, the church bell rang once, though no one had rung it in weeks. When I awoke, I was on the floor, alone. His case was gone. The door stood open, snow blowing across the threshold. My chest ached, my breath shallow, but I was alive, or something like it. On the table, where the vial had been, there was a note written in red ink. "You're safe now." Outside, the footprints led away from my house, but halfway down the road they simply vanished. Before the winter of 1887, Millhaven was the kind of town that believed in order, faith, and the comfort of routine. The church bell marked every hour. Children played in the frozen fields, and the fishermen along the coast swore that the sea itself protected them. But even then, before the sickness came, there was something wrong in the air, too still, too heavy, as if the town waited for its own name to be carved on a tombstone. Dr. Alaric Thorne arrived that autumn, stepping off the Bangor carriage in a long black coat that brushed the ground. He carried no luggage except for a small square trunk, locked with brass clasps that caught the morning light. No one knew his first patient. By the time the mayor asked about his credentials, half the town already trusted him. He spoke softly, treated quickly, and never failed to make the pain stop, though few ever saw the patients afterward. The local papers called him the miracle doctor of Maine. The church priest called him a necessary blessing. But in the quiet hours, when fog rolled down from the hills and covered the streets, people whispered a different name: the Soul Keeper. Thorne's rented house sat at the far edge of town near the woods, a narrow, leaning structure with a roof that seemed to sink into the snow. The windows never opened, though faint light could be seen flickering through the curtains at night. The postman said he often heard faint humming from inside, like a choir singing from beneath the floor. He stopped delivering letters after that. Local children dared each other to touch the iron gate and swear they heard voices calling from behind it. "Help me," one claimed he heard. "He's not done yet," said another. Adults dismissed it as childish fear, but no one went near the property after sundown. Thorne rarely spoke of his past, though some claimed to have glimpsed an old photograph on his desk, himself standing among soldiers, his coat stained, his face expressionless. He was a field doctor, one old fisherman swore. He saw more death than God himself. Whatever truth lay in that rumor, Thorne carried it like a wound that never healed. Millhaven, desperate for miracles, ignored the unease. The mayor invited him to dine at his home. The baker left bread at his doorstep. Even the priest sent letters thanking him for mercy. And still, no one noticed how many townsfolk had quietly vanished, how the register at the general store showed names never crossed out, families unvisited, houses slowly sinking into silence. It wasn't until the gravedigger Samuel Hodge reported that graves had been opened, empty, undisturbed by shovels, that the fear began to bloom. The soil was lifted, not dug, he said, like something rose from underneath. Dr. Thorne offered to examine the ground himself, saying it might be erosion. But Samuel swore he saw something move in Thorne's shadow that night, something tall like a second body following him, echoing his every step. By Christmas, the fog never left the town. Lanterns glowed all day as if the sun had abandoned them. And though the people tried to carry on with carols and candles, no one sang above a whisper. They said light no longer reached Millhaven without Thorne's permission. By January 1888, Dr. Thorne had become both savior and curse to Millhaven. The townspeople depended on him, yet no one dared to look him in the eyes. He moved through the streets like a priest at a funeral, silent, solemn, unshakable. When he passed, mothers pulled their children close and old men crossed themselves as if warding off a storm. No one truly knew where he came from, though whispers traveled faster than wind. Some said he'd once been a surgeon at the Augusta Asylum, dismissed after performing forbidden procedures on patients who never returned. Others believed he was part of a secret cult that worshipped death itself, using medicine as its disguise. Whatever the truth, Thorne never denied any of it. When asked, he only smiled faintly and said, "People fear what they cannot cure." The town's records showed something else strange. Thorne never aged. The black and white photograph hanging in the courthouse, dated 1852, showed a man identical to him standing beside a horse-drawn ambulance. The same sharp jaw, the same hollow eyes. When the sheriff mentioned it, Thorne replied calmly, "There are many men who share a face." The sheriff didn't ask again. The strange part was how every patient Thorne took in was sick, but none were seen leaving. Their families were told they'd been sent to a sanatorium in Portland, yet no one could find proof of such a place. Letters sent there never returned. And in the nights that followed, lights flickered in Thorne's attic, soft blue glows that pulsed like breathing. The local blacksmith, who lived across the hill, swore he saw shapes moving behind the curtains, too tall to be human, too thin to be anything else. He moved his family out of Millhaven before spring. By February, the church bells stopped ringing. The priest's robe was found hanging from the steeple, swaying gently in the wind. Inside his Bible, written across the last page in shaking ink, were 3 words: "He walks twice." That same night, the air turned colder than any winter before. Cattle froze in the fields. The river stopped mid-current and frost crawled across windows from the inside. And through that unnatural silence, people began hearing knocking, not from outside their doors, but beneath their floors, inside their walls, from the corners of their rooms where the lantern light didn't reach. When someone knocked back, the sound answered, always in 3s. "That's how he counts them," said old Martha Crow, the midwife who delivered half the town. 3 knocks for the ones who won't return. The mayor tried to call in doctors from Bangor, but the roads were blocked by snow, and the telegraph lines had gone dead. Millhaven was cut off, alone with its doctor and its dread. Then one morning, the butcher's boy, only 12 years old, ran screaming through the square. He said he'd seen Dr. Thorne in the cemetery, kneeling beside an open grave. The boy swore the coffin inside wasn't empty, and that it wasn't filled with a body but with glass jars that glowed from within, each one humming faintly, like lullabies sung through teeth. The townsfolk gathered their courage that evening and went to confront him, carrying lanterns and pitchforks. But when they reached his house, the door stood open. The rooms were cold, and the only thing left on the desk was a page from his journal. It read, "The body is a cage. I am learning how to open it." By mid-February, Millhaven was no longer a town. It was a wound that refused to close. The people moved like ghosts through fog that never lifted, whispering prayers to a god they feared had abandoned them. Every night another window went dark. Every morning another family's door stood open, snow drifting inside like white ash. No one buried the missing anymore. There were no bodies to bury. They just disappeared. The sheriff tried to search the woods beyond Thorne's house, but even his hounds refused to step past the iron gate. He found claw marks in the frozen earth, as though someone had tried to crawl their way out of the ground. "Not human," he said afterward, his voice shaking. "Nothing human digs up." After that, he stopped patrolling altogether. The only sound left in Millhaven was the tolling wind, and the faint rhythmic thud that came from Thorne's house at night, like a heartbeat echoing through the snow. Some nights it stopped. Other nights it grew louder until windows rattled in their frames. Old Mrs. Crow said it was the sound of the condemned trying to speak, their voices trapped inside glass. Her words might have been dismissed, if not for what we found next. On February 12th, a fisherman named Elias Burke spotted something floating by the frozen docks. A black coat caught beneath the ice. When they pulled it out, they found it wasn't a coat at all but human skin, peeled clean, its shape still intact like a suit someone had stepped out of. The fingers were stiff, curled as if clawing for air. No one claimed it, though most swore it was the same coat Thorne always wore. Later that week, strange lights appeared over the river, blue, green, pulsing, rising into the mist before vanishing. Children said they heard whispers from beneath the ice. Adults told them to stop talking. But I couldn't. I needed to know. I began watching Thorne's house from a distance, hiding near the old elm tree that faced his window. Most nights the curtain stayed shut, but once just before midnight I saw him. He wasn't alone. There were shapes behind him, dozens, maybe more, standing perfectly still, their faces blurred, their bodies swaying slightly, as if underwater. The lantern light flickered over their skin, pale as frost. He turned toward the window, his eyes meeting mine through the glass, and smiled. It wasn't a greeting. It was recognition. The next morning I woke to find something on my doorstep, a glass vial small enough to fit in my palm, filled with what looked like fog swirling inside. It was cold to the touch, heavier than it should have been. Beneath it lay a folded note, 2 words written in the same red ink I'd seen before. "You're ready." I threw the vial into the river. It sank instantly without a ripple, but that night I dreamed of voices calling my name from the water, soft and endless. When I woke, the vial was back on my table, dry and unbroken, and though I couldn't prove it, I swear it pulsed faster whenever I breathed. After that night, sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that vial floating in the dark, its pale light pulsing like a trapped heartbeat. By the 3rd night, it began to hum, not loudly, just a low vibrating sound that seemed to echo from inside my own chest. I tried to throw it away again, into the woods this time, but by morning it was back on my table, resting exactly where I'd left it before. The air around it felt colder now, and when I touched the glass I saw flashes, not memories, but glimpses of something else. A long corridor of light, a door made of bone, and faces, pressed against the inside of the glass, mouths moving soundlessly. I stopped touching it after that. But Millhaven didn't. The town began to rot from the inside. Animals were found dead without a mark on them, their eyes wide, their bodies limp as if drained of something unseen. People stopped leaving their homes after dark. The church bell rang on its own one night, 12 slow chimes that echoed through the snow, though no one was inside to ring it. The next morning, Father Marin was gone, and the pulpit was slick with something that smelled of iron. The only one who didn't seem afraid was Thorne. He had started walking again, appearing at the edges of town like a ghost in daylight. He didn't speak. He only looked. Sometimes he'd stand outside a house for hours, his head slightly tilted as if listening to a sound no one else could hear. And every time he left, someone inside that house went missing by dawn. I wanted to confront him. I told myself I would. But when I stood outside his home again, I felt the same weight in the air. The kind that presses on your bones and whispers that turning back might still save you. His door was open just enough to see light flickering inside, moving like a heartbeat. And then I heard it. A voice, soft, measured, impossibly close. "It's not fear," it said. "It's recognition," my breath caught. I turned, but no one was there. The sound had come from inside my head. The vial on my table began to glow brighter that night. When I held it up to the window, I saw faces swirling within, dozens of them, faint and familiar. Some I recognized from the missing, some I didn't, and one of them looked like me. I dropped it instantly, but it didn't shatter. It rolled toward the door and stopped, as if waiting. Then came the knock. 3 times. Slow, deliberate. I didn't open it, but the knocking didn't stop. It grew softer, like fingertips brushing the wood. "You can't throw away what's yours," a voice whispered through the cracks. "You've already been chosen." The air grew thin, my lungs burning, the world spinning like I was underwater. Then silence. When I opened the door, no one was there. Just snow untouched and a set of footprints leading away from my house. They weren't mine. They led back toward Thorne's gate. And though my hands shook, I followed. I had to, because the hum in my chest was no longer coming from the vial. It was coming from me. October 1887 arrived with a silence that didn't belong to the living. The trees had turned to black silhouettes against the snow, and Millhaven no longer felt like a town. It felt like a waiting room for something that never came. Dr. Thorne's visits had stopped. For 2 weeks, no one saw him leave his house. No light in his window, no sound through the walls. Some thought he'd finally died. Others whispered that he was preparing for something far worse. I decided to find out for myself. The night I went, the moon hung low and red, the air so cold it hurt to breathe. The door to his house wasn't locked. It opened at my touch, slow and reluctant, as if warning me. Inside, the air was still, heavy with that familiar scent of rust and medicine. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, lined with shelves of glass jars, hundreds of them glowing faintly from within. Each held something that moved, slow and pulsing like hearts that refused to stop beating. The sound was faint but constant, a wet rhythm, steady as breathing. My steps echoed as I moved deeper, past rooms filled with surgical instruments laid out in perfect symmetry, past tables where sheets covered shapes that were almost human. Then I saw the journal again, open on his desk. The last entry read, "Their suffering is gone. I only keep what must not decay." My hands shook as I turned the page and found my own name written there, in red ink. The door behind me closed on its own. A voice spoke from the shadows. "You came back sooner than I thought." He stepped forward, pale and calm, his eyes glowing like cold glass. "I thought you'd forgotten." I tried to run, but the floor seemed to pulse under my feet, as if alive. The walls breathed with me, inhaling when I did, exhaling when I stopped. "You shouldn't fight it," he said. They didn't. He gestured to the jars, and inside them, faces began to form, eyes, mouths, silent screams pressing against the glass. They weren't dead. They were dreaming, trapped between one heartbeat and the next. "I saved them," he whispered. "I took what death would waste." I shouted at him, asked what he meant, what he had done. His expression didn't change. "Souls are fragile things," he said. "They fade if left alone, but I can hold them. I can keep them safe." His hand touched one of the jars, and for a moment the thing inside opened its eyes that looked exactly like mine. My stomach turned to ice. "You've been sick for a long time," he said softly. "Millhaven itself is sick. I'm just collecting what it's lost." I backed away, heart pounding, but he moved closer, his presence heavy as stone. "Don't be afraid," he murmured. "It doesn't hurt after the first breath stops." The lights flickered, the hum rose into a low chant, and I felt the air thicken around me. My vision blurred, the room bending like heat over fire. I remember falling, the sound of glass breaking, the jars glowing brighter, and his voice whispering the last words I heard before darkness swallowed everything. "Now you'll never leave." When I woke, the room was different. The jars were gone, replaced by rows of metal tables covered in white sheets. The air was thick, buzzing faintly like the sound before a thunderstorm. My head ached, my body heavy, my breath shallow. I tried to move, but something cold held my wrists in place, straps tight and unyielding. The light above me flickered, and in its pale glow I saw Thorne standing nearby, calm as ever, his gloves already stained with red. "You should be grateful," he said, voice soft as a prayer. "You've seen what comes after. Most people never do." His words drifted like smoke, curling around my thoughts until they no longer felt like mine. "You're not saving anyone," I managed to whisper. He smiled faintly, tilting his head. "You still think I'm killing them? No, I'm freeing them. Bodies rot, but what's inside, what truly matters, can live forever if you know how to listen." He lifted something from the table beside him, a vial, faintly glowing. The same light I'd seen so many times before, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. "Do you know why it comes back to you?" he asked. "Because it's already part of you. It always was." His words sank deep, pulling at the edges of my memory, until I saw flashes, my own hands helping him years ago, my own voice whispering oaths under candlelight, promising to continue his work. No, that couldn't be true. But the visions felt real. The cold metal, the screams fading into silence, the moment we realized a soul could be held, suspended between life and death. "You helped me start this," he said gently. "You were the first to believe." I screamed, denying him, but my voice cracked under the weight of something older than fear. He leaned closer, his breath cold against my ear. "That's why you came back, isn't it? Some part of you remembered." He placed the vial over my chest, pressing it down until its glow bled through my skin. My heart slowed, every beat echoing like a hammer on glass. "Don't fight it," he whispered. "You'll tear yourself apart." The hum grew louder, rising into a pitch that made the walls tremble. My vision began to split, one half seeing him, the other drifting above, watching from somewhere outside myself. The room tilted, reality bending like a mirror submerged in water. I saw faces in the reflection, those he had taken, their mouths moving soundlessly, their eyes begging, and among them, mine. "You see now," he murmured. "There's no death, only transfer." The vial sank deeper, disappearing beneath my ribs. Fire spread through me, bright and cold, until every nerve screamed. My heartbeat stopped, and then continued, not in my chest but somewhere else, somewhere vast and dark. I could hear them, the others whispering, calling, their voices blending into a low chorus. The pain faded, replaced by stillness. I opened my eyes. I was standing beside him, unbound, weightless. He smiled like a proud father. "It's done," he said. "You're whole now." I turned to the table. My body lay there, eyes open, mouth frozen mid-breath. The glow from my chest had vanished, drawn into the vial now resting in Thorne's hand. He placed it carefully on the shelf beside the others, all of them pulsing faintly, in perfect rhythm. "Rest," he said. "You'll wake again when the town calls." He turned away, leaving me in silence. And in that silence I understood the truth. He hadn't stolen my soul. He had shown me where it belonged. Morning in Millhaven came without sound. The snow outside Dr. Thorne's house lay untouched, glistening faintly beneath the gray sky. No footprints, no signs of life, only silence so thick it seemed to swallow even the wind. They found his house 3 days later when the smoke from his chimney stopped. Sheriff Alden led the search, though half his men refused to step inside. "It smells wrong," one whispered. He was right. The air carried a weight, something metallic, something burned. The front door creaked open, and the first breath they took was like breathing through cloth soaked in iron. Every lamp was extinguished. Every clock stopped at midnight. On the floor, a circle of ash surrounded the remains of broken glass. The shelves that once held those glowing jars now stood empty. Only one jar remained, cracked open, faint traces of light pulsing weakly inside. Alden said nothing. He just took off his hat and stared at the desk where Thorne's journal lay. Its final page read, "They wanted peace. I gave it to them." Beneath it, a smear of blood formed the shape of a fingerprint, not his. The rest of the men searched the house, finding rooms stripped bare, except for the basement door. It was nailed shut from the outside. They pried it open with crowbars, expecting bodies, but the darkness below felt alive, whispering like wind through hollow pipes. When they lit their lanterns, the truth of it made 2 men faint. Along the stone walls, human shapes were burned into the surface. Blackened outlines, each one frozen in a pose of fear, mouths open, arms raised. Not corpses, not shadows, but something in between. "How's that possible?" someone muttered. Alden only said, "It ain't." No one dared step further. The air below shimmered faintly, as if heat still lingered where the shapes were scorched. They sealed the basement again, hammering it shut. Outside, snow began to fall harder, erasing the tracks of every man who'd entered. That night, half the town gathered in the church. The priest refused to ring the bell, saying it would disturb the ones that haven't gone yet. Mothers kept their children indoors, covering mirrors, whispering prayers. For weeks, no one spoke his name aloud. The local papers printed nothing except a single notice. "Millhaven mourns what it cannot understand." Months passed. The Thorne estate was fenced off, the windows boarded. But sometimes, when the wind came from the east, People swore they saw lights behind the shutters, soft and blue, flickering in rhythm, like breathing. Travelers who stopped in town said the air near that hill felt heavier, as if the ground itself held a heartbeat. By summer, Millhaven had begun to empty. Families moved south, stores closed, fields turned to rot. What remained were the whispers of the doctor who promised to heal but instead delivered something eternal. Alden left last. Before he went, he placed a single cross at the edge of Thorne's property. It read nothing but one word: souls. He nailed it into frozen ground, stepped back and muttered, "If you took them, God help you." Then he walked away, never returning. Millhaven by autumn had vanished from maps. Only ruins remained, half buried under snow. But those who passed nearby claimed to hear faint heartbeats beneath the ice, as if the town itself was still alive, waiting for the doctor to come home. By the winter of 1888, Millhaven was nothing but a scar on the map. The railway that once stopped there bypassed it entirely, as if even steel refused to cross that soil. Only a few wanderers came near, the curious, the lost, or those who didn't believe the stories. Most didn't stay long enough to leave footprints. The few that did spoke of strange things: a heartbeat beneath the snow, whispers that carried through the trees, and shadows moving inside the boarded houses though no fire burned within. Sheriff Alden's cross still stood, leaning slightly to one side, covered in frost. The name Souls had almost faded, but the ground below it stayed warm even in the coldest nights. A traveler named Ruth Denning, a nurse from Bangor, was the last to write of what she saw there. Her journal, found years later, contained only a few pages about Millhaven. The first read, "The snow is red near the doctor's house. I touched it, it was warm." Her final entry simply said, "They're not gone. They breathe through the earth." Historians dismissed her account as hysteria caused by isolation, but those who read the rest of her journal knew better. She had drawn a map, detailed and careful, showing a pattern beneath the town, circles within circles all connecting at the center, Thorne's basement. In the middle, she had written one word in capital letters: heart. When explorers tried to dig there in 1901, the ground caved in. The earth swallowed 2 men whole before the others could pull back. They filled the pit and marked it off. Locals from nearby towns warned each other never to build near that land again. By 1910, not a single structure remained. Yet some nights, travelers along the coast claimed to see faint lights flickering beneath the frozen ground, spreading outward like veins. "It's the doctor," old fishermen said. "He's still collecting." Decades passed, but the silence of Millhaven never faded. In church records, the town's name was erased, replaced with a simple note: "Condemned by God." Still, not everyone forgot. In 1952, a historian named Samuel Reeves tried to uncover the truth, believing Thorne to be a misunderstood genius. He brought equipment, journals, and faith in science. 3 days later, his campsite was found abandoned. His camera survived, though the film inside showed only one image: rows of faint blue lights forming a circle, and in the center, a shadow with glowing eyes. Authorities said it was a trick of exposure, but those who saw the photo swore they could feel something moving when they looked at it too long. The negatives were burned. Today, no one visits that part of Maine. Maps listed as private forestry land, though no logging has ever occurred. Planes that fly overhead sometimes report interference, short bursts of static like a heartbeat on radio waves. And when storms roll in from the Atlantic, lightning always strikes the same hill first, right above where Thorne's house once stood. They say thunder there doesn't echo. It lingers like a voice repeating itself through time. The land remembers, the souls remember, and somewhere beneath the frozen soil, in a darkness that never warms, Dr. Alaric Thorne continues his work, waiting for the next lost traveler to find his door and knock, just once. For years, no one dared to speak the doctor's name, but his legend never truly died. It lived in the silence between church bells, in the way wind moved through empty barns, in the stories told by those who swore they saw light where no light should be. By the early 1900s, the few remaining records of Millhaven had been sealed in state archives under anomalous incidents. The official reason was plague, but the documents themselves told another story, one that defied reason. Among the reports was a statement from Reverend Colin Hart, the priest who refused to ring the bell. His words were written in trembling script, The ground beneath this town moves like a lung. It breathes when the moon is high. Authorities dismissed it as madness, but soil samples taken years later showed traces of hemoglobin, human blood. No one could explain how. The few scientists who studied it left their findings incomplete, their notes trailing off mid-sentence as if they had stopped suddenly. One wrote, "It's not decaying, it's alive." After that, the investigation was shut down. The archives marked the case as cursed phenomenon, yet there were sightings. In 1923, a freight conductor passing through the nearby valley reported seeing blue veins of light crawling beneath the snow like lightning trapped underground. He quit his job the next day. In 1939, a group of university students attempted to locate the ruins for research. They recorded strange pulses in the soil that matched human cardiac rhythms, 60 beats per minute, steady and slow. One of their audio reels captured a voice whispering faintly, "It doesn't hurt after the first breath stops." The tape was confiscated, labeled as interference. None of the students ever spoke publicly again. People said the government had buried the truth, but some stories refused to stay buried. Locals claimed that the sound of those heartbeats still echoed during winter storms. Sometimes the snow would melt in circular patches, exposing black soil that steamed like breath. Scientists called it geothermal activity. The locals called it the doctor's sleep, but the strangest account came from a diver in 1958. He was exploring the nearby riverbed when his sonar detected a hollow space beneath the hairs perfectly round, filled with what seemed like glass containers. His last transmission before static took over was a single word: eyes. They never found his body. The recovery team later discovered a single jar floating downstream, its glass intact, glowing faintly blue. Inside was something that looked like smoke, but it pulsed as if alive. They sealed it in a lead box and sent it to a research facility. 2 days later, the lab burned to the ground. The report called it an electrical fire. No remains were ever recovered. Since then, anything connected to Dr. Thorne or Millhaven has been systematically erased from official records. Libraries no longer list the town. Old maps have been redrawn. But some say when the fog rolls in from the coast, you can still see the faint outline of Millhaven's main street beneath the mist, and if you listen closely, you might hear a soft knocking just once from somewhere below. The deeper one looks into Millhaven's history, the more it resists being remembered. Archives vanish. Documents decay faster than paper should, and even photographs fade until only outlines remain. Some call it coincidence. Others whisper that it's part of the curse Dr. Thorne left behind, a sickness of memory that consumes those who seek the truth. In 1971, a radio technician named Harold Crane accidentally tuned into a frequency during a storm that carried faint heartbeats mixed with whispers. He thought it was interference from a medical broadcast, but when he slowed the recording, the words became clear. "We're still here." The signal repeated every night for exactly 7 minutes past midnight, only when the wind blew from the east, the direction of Millhaven. He tried to triangulate the source, but each time he got close, his equipment failed. His final log entry read, "Something is calling from beneath the ground." 3 days later, his cabin burned to ash. The fire department found no remains, only melted glass fused to the floor. It looked like jars. Similar events occurred over the next decades. Strangers hearing heartbeats through radios, static forming voices that said names no one should know. The government dismissed it as psychological contagion, but not everyone accepted that. In 1983, a group of paranormal researchers secretly entered the restricted Millhaven site. Their footage, later leaked, showed ruins of the doctor's house covered in frost, though the air temperature was above freezing. As they descended into the remains of the basement, one man began to convulse, saying he could feel the ground breathing. The last frame of the video shows the camera shaking violently before cutting to black. The team never returned. The footage was confiscated, labeled classified, but the raw audio survived online for a short time before being deleted. Those who heard it claimed to recognize their own names whispered in the static. Today, locals still warn travelers not to stop anywhere near that region of Maine. Hunters avoid it entirely, saying their dogs refuse to cross the tree line. Satellite scans reveal faint heat signatures underground, consistent with movement, like thousands of small heartbeats clustered together. Scientists call it tectonic activity, but what breathes under Millhaven doesn't move like Earth. It moves like something living. Some believe Dr. Thorne's work succeeded, that he truly learned to preserve the soul, anchoring it between death and eternity. If that's true, Millhaven isn't abandoned. It's inhabited by those he saved. A few nights each year, when the aurora lights the sky, witnesses claim the snow around the old town glows faintly blue, spreading outward in slow pulses. Those who stand long enough to watch say it feels like being watched back. One fisherman who passed through the area in 1999 wrote that he saw figures beneath the ice. Not reflections, but silhouettes, eyes open, faces calm. They weren't dead, he wrote. They were waiting. No one believed him. Yet when he died months later, his body was found near the shore, frozen upright, mouth open as if mid-breath. The snow around him was warm to the touch. There are still those who search for Thorne's journals, convinced his final writings are hidden beneath the ruins. But maybe that's his last lesson. The soul can't be studied, only surrendered. And somewhere under that frozen earth, where the doctor's voice still hums in the silence, the forgotten heartbeat of Millhaven continues to echo, patient and eternal. They say silence is the loudest sound in Millhaven now. Snow still falls every winter, blanketing the ruins in white, soft, and endless, like the town is trying to bury its own memory. No one dares to rebuild there, not after what happened to the last crew that tried. In 2003, a construction company was hired to turn the area into a memorial park. On the first night of work, they set up lights and equipment, marking foundations where homes once stood. But by morning, every light was shattered, every camera lens cracked, and every piece of metal was coated in frost, even though the temperature never dropped below freezing. One worker was found wandering half a mile away, barefoot, repeating one sentence over and over. He's still collecting. They shut down the project the next day. The government declared Millhaven environmentally unstable, sealing off the land with metal fencing and warning signs. But locals know it's not the ground that's unstable, it's what sleeps beneath it. Even now, some claim to hear faint knocking sounds echoing from under the snow, rhythmic and steady like someone tapping from the other side. Others say if you listen long enough, you can hear your own heartbeat syncing with it. Every few years, a thrill-seeker or paranormal investigator sneaks past the fences, searching for what remains of Dr. Thorne's house. They never find it, not exactly. The layout shifts, the paths twist differently every time. Some explorers report hearing footsteps just behind them, but when they turn, there's only the wind. A few claim to have found the basement entrance, stone steps descending into darkness that smells of rust and cold medicine. None of them ever return with proof. Their footage always ends the same way. A faint hum, a flicker of light, and then static. The locals say that's Thorne's way of choosing. He doesn't kill, not anymore, he takes. They believe the doctor's promise was never broken, that he truly preserved the souls he touched. Only now he's reaching for more. The boundary between his world and ours is thin, especially when the air is still and the snow begins to pulse. The few remaining witnesses say it feels like the town itself is breathing again, slow and patient. Scientists can't explain the heat patterns, the seismic readings, or the low-frequency vibrations that match human heartbeats. They've tried, but data vanishes, corrupted beyond recovery. It's as if Millhaven doesn't want to be known. They say if you travel far enough north and stand where the map shows nothing, you can feel it. The faint warmth under your feet. The heartbeat that isn't yours. And if you whisper a name, any name at all, sometimes you'll hear a voice whisper it back. No one knows where Dr. Thorne is buried, if he's buried at all. Some say he lies beneath the snow, still guarding what he called his collection. Others believe he became part of it, that the souls he saved eventually took him too. But a few think he's still alive in some form, neither ghost nor man, just a keeper of what should have been lost. Those who claim to have seen him describe a tall figure walking the frozen road at night, coat unmarked by snow, eyes pale as frost. He never speaks, never turns his head. But if you follow his trail, your footprints disappear behind you. Maybe he's looking for the ones who escaped. Maybe he's still healing in his own way. Or maybe Millhaven was never cursed at all. Maybe it's the rest of the world that's sick, and Thorne's still collecting what it's lost. There are stories that refuse to die, no matter how much time you bury them under. Millhaven's tale is one of those. It seeps through the years like thawing ice, cold and clear, reshaping itself in whispers. Some say Dr. Thorne was a monster who tried to play God. Others insist he was a savior who discovered something far beyond human comprehension. But the truth lies somewhere in between, waiting under layers of frost and silence. In 2017, a journalist named Clara Wren visited the site after receiving a letter with no return address. It contained a single photograph, black and white, old and cracked. It showed Dr. Alaric Thorne standing outside his house holding what looked like a glass jar. The strange part? In the reflection of the jar, there was a second face staring back, Clara's. She had never seen the image before. Drawn by both fear and curiosity, she went to Millhaven, ignoring every warning. The gates were rusted but still standing. The air was thick with a smell she couldn't describe, metallic, ancient, familiar. She found remnants of houses, snow-covered paths, and what looked like graves with no names. As she walked deeper, the wind stopped. Everything became too still. Her camera started clicking on its own. When she looked through the lens, she saw figures standing among the trees, shadowed, translucent, watching her. Then she heard it, a heartbeat, not hers, slow and steady beneath the ground. She ran toward it, following the pulse, until she reached what looked like the remains of a doorway buried in snow. Her breath fogged the air as she brushed the frost away, revealing a brass nameplate, A. Thorne, M.D. The heartbeat grew louder. The door wasn't locked. Inside was darkness that swallowed her flashlight. The recordings she left behind are the last anyone heard of her. The final minutes are faint, her voice trembling. They're not gone. They're awake. He's still here. Then static. Search teams never found her. But weeks later, towns miles away reported strange phenomena. Lights flickering in patterns that matched heart rhythms. Hospital patients hearing their own monitors whispering words. In one hospital, a nurse claimed she saw an unfamiliar man walking down the hallway, coat buttoned to his throat, eyes pale as ice. He stopped at a dying patient's bedside, held their hand and said softly, "You won't be alone." When she blinked, he was gone. The patient's heartbeat, however, kept pulsing on the monitor for hours after death. They say that's Thorne's mercy, that he still roams, tending to the ones who slip between life and death. Some believe every soul he takes adds to a silent chorus somewhere beneath the snow, keeping Millhaven alive in the way only ghosts can live. Maybe that's what immortality really is. Not endless life, but endless memory. And perhaps Dr. Thorne understood that long before anyone else did. The town may be gone, erased from maps, but its echo lingers. Sometimes when the wind is just right and winter's breath touches your skin, you can almost hear it. A faint hum, the heartbeat of a place that refuses to die. If you listen closely enough, it sounds almost human. And if you ever find yourself traveling through the northern woods on a fog-drenched night, don't follow the sound of knocking in the distance. Don't answer if someone calls your name in a voice that sounds like your own. And whatever you do, if you see a man in an old doctor's coat walking toward you through the snow, don't look into his eyes. Because if you do, you'll understand why no one ever really leaves Millhaven.